Spring is just around the corner. It's so close, I can feel it. The John Deere is back in the garage, and I'm getting a jump start on the putting green. Utah is starting to roll out water conservation strategies, and we may no longer need to worry about adjusting our clocks for daylight savings. It's another full episode of the Cherish Each Moment podcast. Right, so went ahead and picked up the John Deere mower from the shop, from getting it looked at, getting the reel sharpened, got a new bed knife on there. It's ready to go, and I'm excited to have it back, but when the guy moved it up at the shop, so it was parked in the corner, kind of out of the way of everything, and I got there and I saw it sitting where they had parked it, and I went to the office to pay, and between the time I walked to the office to pay and come back out into the shop to get ready to load it in the truck, they had, just kind of backed it up from where it was, maybe like 10 feet. And when I came out into the shop and looked at it, there was a puddle underneath of it. That's not what you would expect to see, especially picking it up from the shop. We came to the conclusion that it was gas. It was leaking fuel. Now, for the record, I don't blame them for this. This is not their fault. I think it's just one more thing with the mower. And I only had them sharpen it, really, and I had them look at the belts to see if there's anything else they could do as far as tightening the belts, because it does struggle still to go when you drop the lever to engage the belts to make it go forward. So I wanted them to look at that, and they said that they can't adjust the belts any tighter than they already are. So it's not engaging very easily still. I need to test it on the putting green, but I'm not going to test it until I get this fuel leaking situation figured out. They seem to think that it needs a new pulley. I'll have to look into that. I want to try and mow with it first and see how it goes before I make any more major repairs to it. So, as always, I'll keep you updated on that. I'm really hoping I don't need to put too much more into this mower. As you can imagine, my anxiety to use it and the more attention to repairs that it needs is starting to get more frustrating as spring approaches. So I'll need to do something one way or another. Hoping for the best outcome here, though. Before I get into some water updates, I do have a little irony to share. And those of you that know me know I love some good irony. Well, the latest comes from the Players' Championship golf tournament that was recently held at TPC Sawgrass. This was like 2 weekends ago. Gotta love their infamous par 3 17th hole with the island green. Well, they posted on their Facebook page, the Players' Championship, the official Facebook page for them, recognizing the agronomy team as the real heroes of the week, and rightly so. The irony comes as they recognize their sponsor on the post. Clearly, they have to. The Players' Championship was presented by True Green this year. This is so funny. I wasn't surprised at all to see that Brett Goodyear had left a comment on that post expressing how all of us really feel. He said, quote, LOL that this is, quote, presented by True Green, that they can't even keep my neighbor's lawn alive. I'm sure they had a ton to do with how the grounds crew took care of the course. Good job to Brett for that comment. That's great. I love it. All right, so getting into some water updates out here in Utah. As you should know by now from listening to this show, I try to provide regular updates on the water situation out west, and we're starting to see what this year's going to look like in terms of conservation strategies and restrictions in some areas of the state. From my local Fox 13 News, they say more water restrictions will be imposed across the state as the drought continues into another year. We had the driest January and February on record, said Candace Hassenjager, the executive director of Utah's Division of Water Resources. Reservoirs are still about half full, and that's 10% lower than this same time last year. The state is still categorized to be in a state of exceptional drought, and though none of the state is in extreme drought, local water districts are beginning to roll out restrictions in advance of what could be another hot, dry summer. Southern Utah's Washington County looks better than most, but we will still impose restrictions. That's coming from the general manager of their Water Conservancy District. Her name is Bree Thompson. We have time of day watering ordinances that municipalities enact, and our municipalities are looking at landscape ordinances, and we're always promoting conservation and pushing conservation measures. It's a quote from the article. The article goes on to say, this year, the Washington County Water Conservancy District will enact special fees for those who are deemed, quote, high water users. It will be $1 per 1,000 gallons over an allotment, Thompson said. We want people to see that they are among those higher users and know we want them to reach out to the district and see if we can help them reduce their water usage because it is such a critical resource in southern Utah, she said. I have some quick thoughts about this before I get into the rest of the article, which goes into northern Utah. And for those of you who are curious, I'm not necessarily in northern Utah. I would say I'm more central, maybe north central Utah. But Washington County area that we were just talking about is southern Utah. But some quick thoughts. I'm all for fees. I'm not against fees being imposed if you exceed an allotment. I get that. It's kind of a way just to bring it to your attention, and that's one of the ways that they do that. Especially if it's metered. A lot of places around here are not metered, and I think that's part of the problem. But I'm not going to complain because I'm not metered. I pay a flat rate for pressurized irrigation every month, and it's dirt cheap. I've since learned a couple years ago, every house in my city built after I think 2014 has a meter on it. So we got lucky, but I don't doubt that they'll continue to backfill on those and install meters at older houses. So hopefully that never happens, but that'll probably happen. We'll not be looking forward to that day. But about these fees, in all fairness, like I said, I'm not against the fee idea, but in fairness, I would hope that the allotment is reasonable. Having an unreasonable allotment of water is going to cause more drama than the imposed fees will. There aren't any details here about how the allotment system works, which I'm guessing means it hasn't really been officially settled on yet. But I would hope that my 10,000 square feet would allow for more water than someone in another neighborhood that has maybe 2,000 square feet. Makes sense. And speaking of the fees, that kind of leads to my second thought. The article mentioned here that the the fee would be $1 for every 1,000 gallons used in excess. So if you have an allotment of 30,000 gallons, just throw a random number out there. If you have an allotment of 30,000 gallons a month for your pressurized irrigation and your meter ticks over 30,000, well, when you hit 31,000, that's going to be $1. Woohoo. 1,000 gallons is a lot of water. And a whole dollar for that doesn't seem like it would be impactful enough to really cause a homeowner to stop and think about paying a few extra bucks a month because they exceeded their water allowance. And I don't even know, unless someone's really paying attention to their bill, if they're even going to notice something like that. Unless they're using many thousands of gallons. Like I would probably be 50,000 gallons over or 100,000 gallons over. That's going to be $100. That's probably going to be where I start to go, oh, wait, why is my bill $100 more than it normally is? I think the dollar is too low. Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it works. I did confirm with a friend who lives down in Washington County that all of this is going into effect. It's going to happen. But I want to get to northern Utah here. This is where it gets super interesting. There's quite a stark difference between southern Utah and northern Utah. Now, southern Utah is all downstream, so that's why I think this is so interesting. It seems like the city or the district downstream is a lot more easy about this than the cities upstream or closer to the actual source. Check this out. Back to the article. In northern Utah, the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District has announced a series of new restrictions. Reservoirs remain low with enough supply currently to cover drinking water demands and a little outdoor use, said District CEO Scott Paxman. Outdoor water use will be cut by 60%. Yeah, you heard that right. 60% cut in outdoor water use in northern Utah. To put it bluntly, well, that escalated quickly. Agriculture water use gets cut by 40%. That will be another big hit on a lot of people. In addition to all of that, this year the district will also require a 10% cut on indoor water use. First time it's ever happened. They'll also be delaying outdoor water service until mid-May and cutting it off mid-September, pushing for only weekly lawn watering and continuing to prohibit new landscaping because it, quote, hogs so much water. So just to give you a little bit of perspective there, when they say that they're delaying outdoor water service until mid-May and cutting it off in mid-September, under normal circumstances, in normal years, in times past, most cities will turn on their pressurized irrigation systems around beginning or middle of April, and they'll cut them off around middle to end of October, give or take. Usually around mid-April to mid-October. So in northern Utah, they're gonna delay that on both ends by a month. So that's 2 total months of water lost in comparison to previous years. So that's pretty crazy. Just to give you an idea, last year I had the grass green to the beginning of December. Now, granted, I'm not watering twice a week all the way through November and into December. Maybe once a week as fall kind of diminishes and fades into winter, and it gets into ground temperatures coming into freezing, and I actually turn the sprinklers off. So to cut it off in middle of September, that's at least another month that you could have normally been watering. So going to be interesting. There's a little bit more here. They say they'll continue their 3 strikes and you're out rule, where excessive water users get a series of fines before their secondary water supply is shut off if nothing changes. Now, again, a lot of the cities within these districts don't have meters, so it'll be interesting to see how they go about determining how much water is being used if they can't meter specific addresses at a time. So we'll see. As you can tell from all of that, northern Utah is being quite a bit more aggressive in their strategies to conserve. So with all of that being said, my thoughts and my sympathies are with Ryan from the Highlander Lawn and Jeremy of the Greener Lawn. They live within that district up there. So it will be interesting to keep up with their content this year to see how it goes and what they're doing to strategize through all of this. They've both been on the show before. If you haven't had a chance to listen to their episodes, go get them. And if you're not already subscribed to their YouTube channels, check them out. That's the Highlander Lawn and the Greener Lawn. Really good stuff. As for my area, I actually just found out today, the day that I recorded this, which is several days after initially writing up what I just told you. I finally found out what my city's planning on doing. And for those of you who don't know, my city is a little bit different than most around here as far as the secondary irrigation supply is concerned. That supply is obviously a secondary feed. It's separate from the house, which is common in Utah. But what's different about mine is it's the same water supply. It's the same infrastructure that supplies water to the fire hydrants around town. So it's never shut off. They never shut off our irrigation. We have a shut-off valve where that water comes into our property, and that's it. So when I shut my water off, I can, in the middle of winter, turn it on if I want to. Now, that would be dumb, but if I wanted to, I could. Other cities, they completely cut off the pressurization, so there's no water until they decide to turn it back on again. But my city can't do that. Otherwise, if there's a fire, there would be no water at the hydrant. So kind of interesting. They announced, my city, they announced this week that last month the city council passed an ordinance that limits the use of the pressurized irrigation water to be used between April 15th and October 15th, with the exception of new seed and sod. So this is what it used to be for everybody else, at least in surrounding cities and areas up north that have been reduced by 60%. It used to be around mid-April to mid-October. They'd turn it on and you could water within reason. So this is fine. I'm fine with this. We're almost at the end of March. It's expected that our temperatures are going to be warming up and ramping up into spring by the end of the week. So by the end of March, in fact, this weekend I'm planning on getting my pre-emergent out and my first fertilizer feeding. I'm going to turn my sprinklers on this weekend and just test them. And I emphasize test them. It's going to water in my pre-emergent and my fertilizer, and I'm going to be able to ensure that my sprinklers are working, and that's going to be my excuse to water in my pre-emergent and my fertilizer. And then after that, I'm going to wait until around the 15th of April, and then I'll go into a regular watering schedule. So along with that announcement, the city also announced some good news, and I thought this was really interesting, so I'm going to share it with you. They reported that last year, residents were able to save over 1 billion gallons of pressurized water. That's billion with a B. That's 21% less water used than 2020. 1 billion gallons of water saved through people being more conservatively mindful. And that's what I've really been trying to get at the last however long I've been talking about this, over a year, probably even longer than that. There's so many restrictions that go into place. Like, look at what's happening up north. There's so many restrictions up there. And I wonder if more education and more recommendations at helping people to understand why we conserve and what things that can be done that are good conservation practices, I wonder if that would have put them in a better position to not be as harsh in what they're doing up there right now. My city does a really great job at explaining why we need to conserve and what things you can do to conserve and all this stuff, and it's clearly working. Our restrictions so far, at least, aren't as nearly harsh as northern Utah. So I'm really grateful for that. As I've said before, I'm in no way against being mindful about conserving water. I hope that's clear. It's worth learning about, and in my opinion, it's essential to implementing in your lawn care strategy. You can have a green lawn. I'm living proof of that, even through the dog days of summer, while still using less water than you think you need. And I did my absolute best to demonstrate that last year by staying within my local watering restrictions, and I'll continue to do that this year and into the future as well. The Utah legislature also approved for this year $5 million in incentives to get people to ditch non-functional and non-essential turf in yards, starting with the parking strips. And I am not a fan of those anyway. I don't have one. A couple of my neighbors do, several of my neighbors do, and some of them have already gotten rid of them. But there's still some around. It's not uncommon. Utah's the first state in the nation to implement a statewide Flip Your Strip program. And I don't see any issues with programs like this. I think they're fine. As I said before, I won't have any problems until they take away your freedom to choose. But before someone chooses, I really hope they weigh the pros and cons of both options. I was down in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, and there isn't much grass left out there. I grew up in Las Vegas. I lived there for the majority of my life, even up to this point. And when you're out there, you can just tell. Like, it feels different there. The environment is very different. It's very dry. It's very arid. And as you know, if you've paid attention to it, healthy grass provides a much cooler environment, and it filters out so much from the air. And a properly maintained lawn provides a lot of benefits that I value. And I think many of those who are uneducated take for granted those things simply because of ignorance. But I get it. If you don't care to tend to a lawn, if you'd rather have something else, go for it. That's fine. But don't jump on a soapbox and try to convince me otherwise, because it's just not going to happen. Don't even waste your time. I am curious, though. I was doing a little bit of forward thinking, and I thought about what might happen should the water supply out west just run out. It's gone. What if we only have enough for drinking water? What if we don't have enough for drinking water? Is there going to be some kind of mass migration out of the majority of the western states? Wouldn't that be fascinating? Honestly, I would expect more drastic steps to advance the technology to either transport water through pipelines from other sources out west, or even look at the possibility of drawing and filtering water from the ocean. Plenty of water out there. Obviously, these are drastic, and I'm just kind of throwing thoughts out there, and hopefully it never comes to this. I really hope that it never comes to that. But if things keep continuing to trend the way that they have, I would like to think that our leaders might be more open to other methods of getting water during extraordinary drought situations rather than cutting off supply to constituents altogether. Spring is upon us. Are you ready? Are you excited? If I could describe how I feel currently, I would say I'm more anxious than anything else. We're still very much in the teasing season. A few days ago, it was about 60 degrees when I finished up working, and I had about an hour to kill. So I decided I would spray some goodies on the putting green to see if I could wake it up early. I sprayed a mix of Green Punch and Humic 12, and then I watered it in for about 15 minutes with a hose sprinkler. And we actually got a little rain that night too, and that obviously helps water it in a little bit more. I mowed it for the first time 4 days later, and I hit it with some spoon juice. And I know I need to be pushing roots, but if I'm being totally honest, I just really want to try and get a quick green up. It's still too early, or at least at the time it's still too early to do much. But it's fun to see the stark contrast between the dormant bluegrass and the green bent grass on the putting green. Even 4 days later, it was nice. I'm working on a video for it, and I'm planning to get out there again either a week later from that initial application of Green Punch or just a few days after that to finish up that video and see how green I can get it within just like a week or a week and a half. It's pretty fun. It was so nice to mow, and the putting green looks good, all things considered. I know I need to be pushing roots, and my next application is gonna do that. The goal is to fill in the rest of that green as fast as I can, and I think there's only a couple spots that I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more seed on, and we should be there hopefully within a very, very, very short period of time. But my next application is going to go back to my weekly-ish green start RGS combo, and I'm not going to do a pre-emergent on the putting green because I am going to be putting more seed down, so I don't want to really get into that. But the goal this year is to fill it all the way in, have no more bare spots or sandy spots that the cats can poo on, and I want to smooth it out as much as possible. I want to start on that. That's going to be the next phase, is bringing in top dressing, sand for top dressing, and smoothing it out. I do plan on getting a hole cutter and cutting a hole in it and getting some flags, probably 2 or 3 holes out there, and that should be a lot of fun. Speaking of spring, there are signs around the neighborhood. Not actual signs, but signs that spring is upon us. I'm seeing lawn care companies pulling their trailers and their equipment, driving trucks around. I even saw one of my neighbors had their lawn aerated. I pulled up to the mailbox and saw a guy on a stand-on aerator aerating the lawn. That was pretty cool. And I'm getting flyers on my door and in my mailbox, as I'm sure most of you are too, advertising for lawn and landscaping services. And my first thoughts when I get those, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'm sure you just toss them in the garbage like I do. But for me, it's kind of like, why waste your time? You know, what the audacity of these people. Didn't they see the lawn when they walked up? Yeah, it's dormant, but it still has stripes in it. And it does. It hasn't been mowed since the beginning of December, and it still has really good looking stripes in it. But I got to thinking about it, and I think I've humbled myself just a little bit. I don't think these guys are really looking at anyone's lawn when they're passing these flyers out. They're out there hustling. They've got their heads down. Their goal is to get as many of these flyers out as they possibly can, because they know the more they pass out, the more likely they are to actually gain an account from one of those flyers. And so I was curious to know what maybe the average conversion rate is for that kind of marketing or advertising. I didn't think it would really be very high. And I'm sure it's different, and you have, good spots and bad spots where it kind of trends a little higher than other places. I reached out to my friend Jake the Lawn Kid. I asked him about his conversion rate. I know he passes out flyers for his business, and he told me he gets about one new customer for about every 100 flyers that he hands out. It's 1% conversion rate. So, like I said, if you're going to do flyers, and I would bet anything that's not all these guys are doing, but if you're going to do flyers, the more you get out there, the better. One last sign of spring for me is daylight savings time. And daylight savings time hit a little harder this time around than previous times. This past week, leading up to daylight savings, my family and I were in California on a little vacation, little family trip. We went to go see my grandma, and we spent a couple days at the beach and a couple days at Disneyland. And we had a great time. Let's just not talk about the gas prices out there. It's unreal. Anyways, California is an hour behind Utah. So we already had an hour that we were losing coming back home to Utah. And then that same weekend, daylight savings swiped another hour away from us. So I'm still recovering from that. Hope to be recovered fully before we have to switch back again. But the good news is, I guess depending on who you ask, it looks like there's a pretty solid chance that we may not have to worry about switching those clocks back and forth for much longer. I know everyone from Arizona is probably laughing at this, wondering what took so long. They've been enjoying standard time for quite a while. Not that I would prefer standard time. I'll talk about that in a second. But for the rest of us, we have something to be excited about. At least I do. I'm not sure about other states, but every time daylight savings comes around, there are always conversations here in Utah about ditching the practice. In fact, the Utah legislature passed a bill about a year or so ago to stay on the daylight time indefinitely. And when they passed that bill, Utah joined 17 other states with the same idea who were waiting for congressional approval. Well, it sounds like Congress wants to go all in on this, and they are proposing to keep daylight savings time as the new standard. The bill started in the Senate, and it passed unanimously, which is pretty great. And so now it goes on to the House, and if they pass it, then it will go to the president's desk. So obviously everyone has their preference on whether they would choose standard time or daylight time. Standard time is what we were on from November to March, and we just switched over to daylight time. So it really just comes down to, do you want more light in the mornings or more light going into the evenings? I'll tell you what, I'm in favor of daylight time because, number one, I don't mind the dark mornings. I'm not a morning person. I never have been. So dark mornings are pretty much irrelevant to me. And the few days during the year that I would get up early in the mornings. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't bother me. But I prefer longer daylight time later in the day, because most of the time I spend outside is in the evening, and the more daylight I can have in the evening, the easier it is for me to actually get stuff done, especially during the week after I finish working the day job. It really sucks going outside. You get off work, say 5 o'clock. You go outside, it's going to be dark at 6, maybe 6:30. So you're already racing the sunset to get out there, get all your stuff together, figure out what you're going to do it, and get back inside. I don't like to be rushed like that. I just don't. I like to take my time. I like to think things through. I like to actually enjoy it, especially when I'm mowing. Got to cherish it. So having more time in the evenings, I'm totally for it. So I hope this bill passes the House. I hope it goes to the president's desk. I hope it gets made into law. And if you're against the changed daylight time because you prefer standard time, I'm sorry. I feel like no matter which one was chosen, we would all have to adapt, like we've been doing twice a year since the practice was initially instituted back in the day. At least the good news is that we don't have to worry about it anymore going forward. Well, at least once it's implemented, which I believe is going to be fall of next year, 2023. Exciting times. Very exciting times. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of the show. Thank you so much for listening and cherishing these moments with me. I hope if you've made it this far that you'll consider subscribing to the show on whatever platform you choose to listen, if you haven't already. Please also consider following me on all of my other social media channels, linked in the description. Until next time, see ya!